As a homeschooler, I'll tell you what concerns me most. School choice, education savings accounts, vouchers. It's all the same thing, but whatever name it has, that concerns me because I really, truly believe it's going to change the face of homeschool freedom.
Welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few, US Pie's weekly podcast that empowers parents to reclaim their children's education from government bureaucrats and social engineers, equipping you with the tools and resources needed to join the cause.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm April Few, in for Sherry. Back with us today is Nicki Truesdell, a veteran homeschooler, author, speaker, and outspoken advocate for Christian home education and parental control over children's schooling. Before we dive in, give us a 5-star rating or thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe, and visit uspie.org to learn more and join the movement.
Today's episode is brought to you by U.S. parents involved in education. U.S. Pie's mission is to empower parents and local communities to break free from federal and national influences, thereby reclaiming parental authority over their children's education. For more insights from U.S. parents involved in education, connect with us at US Pie on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm April Few, in for Sherry. Joining me is Nicki Truesdell, a Christian wife, mother, veteran homeschooler, and speaker. Nicki's blog has been an influential voice in the homeschool community for years. She's written widely on why homeschooling works, how it can remain true to biblical values, and why parents must remain vigilant about growing threats. Nicki Truesdell, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be back.
You describe yourself as a second-generation homeschooler. I was not homeschooled. I went to public school from kindergarten all the way until I graduated high school.
Okay.
How did growing up in a homeschool family shape your own convictions about education, parenting, and faith? But mainly, how did being homeschooled shape how you educate your children?
It did in a lot of ways, but I'll say that I started out in public school through the 5th grade. Basically, I went to public school. And so I'll say that also shaped the way I view education, because I did have that public school experience. When my parents became Christians in the early 80s, they were pretty determined to go ahead and change their whole lives. And that included the way that we were brought up, my sister and I. And so as soon as they were introduced to homeschooling, they knew that was the option for our family. So when I was 11, we started homeschooling, and I got to go all the way through high school. And I think it shaped a lot of things. At the time, I loved it. So even way back then in the 80s, I enjoyed being at home with my family. I enjoyed the laid-back pace and the flexibility. And when I speak of flexibility, not only was there flexibility to take time on subjects that were hard, but to also move as quickly as I wanted to through the things I loved. And so my favorite things were English, literature, and all, not British, but like English as a subject, literature. I loved reading, and I really enjoyed my government textbook. And so with those things, I was allowed to move as quickly as I wanted to through them. My mom just let me have free reign and go fast through those. And so I would just get out that government book and read and do the workbook, obviously. But if there were different speeches or quotes from documents, I would assign myself memorization projects from that book. And so that it really gave me a lot of freedom to develop my interests and passions, which I still have today. I still love reading. I still am very passionate about American politics and government and just being a citizen of a free country. And so all of that had an influence on me way back then. But when I became a parent, I also knew immediately I could never send my kids to public school. And because I did have such a wonderful experience as a homeschool kid, there was no question. There was never any question that my kids would go to public school. And so they never have.
Wonderful. So over the years, as you raise your children in the same homeschool environment, what advice would you give to other families today?
Well, I could go on all day, but I won't. And so the advice I give that I have been giving over the past few years is a lot less about, like the logistics of it, the books, where do you buy your curriculum, how do you set a schedule, which I do talk about that stuff a lot, but I think the advice I give more readily is the why, and so I talk a lot about how we are raising children different from the world, and homeschooling isn't really just starting a whole new academic program, although it is. I look at homeschooling as a way to get your kids out of public school. To me, that's first and foremost what it is. It's not public school. And then everything else to me is family life. And so I've said things like be a family and not a school. And homeschooling is parenting with school supplies. And I know that sounds simplified, but really it is. It's just that simple. It's being a parent just a little bit more than you were doing if your kids are at school all day. Now you've got books and pencils and paper and lesson plans and field trips and things like that, but you're just being more of a parent than you ever were before. And what that means is flexibility, like I talked about with my childhood. Flexibility, being a family together. So even without touching the schoolwork for a minute, we're talking about family relationships being closer, stronger, parents having an influence in their kids' lives on a very regular basis instead of the evening homework assignments, or going to do something once on the weekends. This is real parental responsibility. It's taking complete control of your child's upbringing. And yeah, it includes a lot of academics, but I think even more important is influencing the whole person. You're shaping a future adult. You're shaping a future father or mother, a husband or wife, a grandparent, a church member, a voter, all of those things. It's so important. And so we usually focus like on, okay, I've got to buy reading curriculum, or what's the best math curriculum, and how do I get these kids to sit still and do their work? And all of those things are very important, but I really hope people will focus on the whole person, the whole project, which is raising kids with a biblical worldview outside the Marxist public school system. So that's probably the kind of advice I give the most, is looking deeper, looking at the big picture, and remembering all of that when days are hard, because obviously some days are very difficult.
Amen. Oh, wow. It's funny that you say that because I get asked a lot as well about homeschooling. And I see on your website that you even have where you will do a consultation, which I think is great because there's so many questions that parents have. If it weren't for fellow homeschool moms who helped me, I would have been completely lost. So it
Oh,
was a lot of
absolutely.
talking and asking questions.
Yeah.
But recently, I find myself too just telling parents, just do it. And also, it took me quite some time to figure out exactly what curriculum that we liked and what approach we liked,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I find myself saying, you know what, if they aren't reading by age, 8, just who cares? Almost, I'm almost like,
Yeah.
who cares at this point? Because what is it? A third of high schoolers are reading just on like a basic level,
Yeah.
so they can't even read. So I don't think that parents could even do a worse job.
Can't. And the thing I
Um,
learned with reading, I have 5 kids and they all did it differently. And I learned that as long as you are progressing consistently, they will be readers, even if it is 8 or 9 or 10 years old. I have a friend whose son is 12 now, and this year he finally conquered reading, and it was scary for her, but I just kept saying, just keep on going, don't give up, don't stop, don't keep switching curriculums, just keep moving forward, even if it's very, very slow, and he will read. And now he does, and he reads real books. So I think your advice is great. Just don't worry, because it will happen. It will come.
Yeah, parents, we got to take the pressure off because it
Yes.
is terrifying to think that you have to replicate school at home. That is terrifying. You
Yes.
absolutely don't have to.
Yeah, don't even try. It's overwhelming, and I think that leads to burnout for a lot of people because they're trying so hard to match up to something that they think is happening, which isn't. And they put so much pressure on themselves that a lot of people give up on homeschooling because of that right there. And
Mm,
so don't even bother.
yes,
Don't worry about it.
yes. And you said something else that struck me. You said that home education is more than just academics, and it is. And that just is so very telling because people want to say, you send your kids to government schools and they want to say, oh, it's just for school, it's academics. But education, as you know, is discipleship. It is educating the whole child. And, who do you want doing that? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
in one of your blog posts, you argue that government education does what all government does, complicates education, and that homeschooling can be simple, flexible, and effective when done right. From your experience, what are the core strengths of homeschooling that public schools simply cannot replicate?
Oh, there's so many. As we all know, if people would just admit it, government makes everything harder, more expensive, and less efficient. So that's what they do with public education. It is government school. And so, and some people don't like that term, but that's exactly what it is. And I just think back, first of all, to the way education was before 1900 in this country. It was not regulated. It was random. People might call it not efficient, but that was the beauty of it, was not trying to be like a factory, and produce so many outcomes by a certain date or time. But it was so organic, and people did it in a hundred different ways, 100 different places, different books, different curriculum, different kinds of teachers, no teacher at all. And so with that very random curriculum, or the whole random education in America up before 1900, we still produced one of the greatest countries, if not the greatest country, that's my opinion, in the entire world. And how did we do that with, school teachers who were teenagers on the prairie, and moms teaching their kids to read at home, and some kids going to school and some kids not going to school, and then still produce the Transcontinental Railroad and invent the steam engine and the sewing machine and the telegraph, and
That's
how
right.
many inventions came about before 1900 that changed the world. And so my point is, government education has only made things worse as far as education goes. They've turned it into a factory. But at home, it's back to that organic method. It's however you see fit to educate your children. And so there's so much flexibility. That's the first core strength, I believe, is the flexibility. Whether it's your daily schedule, weekly, yearly schedule. Our family school's year round, and we just take a break when we need it. Scheduling is the flexibility there, but also scheduling the school years. Excuse me. I don't worry about grade levels. We don't even think about them. Well, I take that back. My teenagers will sometimes ask, "What grade am I in?" And because they want to know compared to friends, what grade level am I? But I always say it depends on what you're working on right now, really. And grade levels are for public school. They're not for home. So I try to encourage parents to think outside of that, and quit worrying about putting your kids in a box, because that's not real education. That's not how true education works. In reality, every kid is advanced in one area and probably not very good in another. And it could be language arts, math, science, history, whatever's hands on. Every kid is going to be different, and they're not going to truly be on one grade level all the way across in all the subjects. And so at home, you get to take advantage of that. I love that, because if a kid struggles in math, they can take more time, which I did as a homeschool student myself too. And then, like I also said, they can advance and go quickly through the things that they're good at or they love. Another huge bonus for homeschooling is that you are shaping a worldview. And we did say that public schoolers have a worldview too, but it's not the Christian worldview. It is secular, humanist, and Marxist, and it strives for neutrality. But if you understand that there is no such thing as a neutral education, you realize that public school education is not neutral. And so in homeschooling, you don't even have to pretend to be neutral. You give your kids all the information, obviously at appropriate levels. which public schools aren't even doing anymore. But when you want to teach your kids about the birds and the bees, you can decide when they're ready and what materials you want to use and how you're going to approach it. If you want to talk to them about feminism and communism, capitalism, all the isms, you get to do that, and you don't have to leave anything out. You don't have to leave out, the founders believed in providence because it might violate the fake separation of church and state. You get to tell your kids what the founders believed about God and read to them from the primary source documents and show them that it was real. So there's so many things about worldview that are just so awesome about homeschooling, because if you've got a resource, you can use it. There's no government telling you, oh, that's not been approved, or we don't use that here. You're the librarian, you're the curriculum provider, you're all of that. And that blows public school out of the water, in my opinion. So those are probably my top two favorite things about homeschooling, and within those, there's just 100 different wonderful bonuses.
That's awesome. We do need to take a short break, but I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of different models of home education now. I guess we can use that loosely. Hybrids and other models. And some of them, to me, almost seems like, I know it can work for a lot of families, but some of them, the parents don't choose the curriculum and so on. True home education, the parent is the one completely in charge of everything. They have full responsibility. How would you encourage parents to just take back that full responsibility? Even if they're afraid, maybe they think, like, I don't even have a college degree and I homeschool my child, and I would never let anybody else homeschool them, or teach them, disciple them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I feel like some parents still just want somebody else to teach or raise their children or watch their children. How would you encourage parents to just take back that responsibility?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you brought up the college degree. My mom dropped out of school in the ninth grade and never went back, and she homeschooled me and my sister. And so that's why I wrote the book called Anyone Can Homeschool. My mom was my first inspiration for that. And then along the way, I've talked to so many other parents in the same situation. No high school degree, diploma, maybe not a college degree either. In fact, people that have a college degree, especially in education, often find that that makes homeschooling harder because they're trying to do what public school does. And that's not how we homeschool. And so I don't know how many public school teacher turned homeschool mom friends I have that have told me the exact same thing. Just like, that only made my life harder. I had to unlearn all of my education degree stuff in order to homeschool my children. And so for a long time, for years and years and years, I've said it's important to keep the home in homeschooling. It's important to be a home-centered family. It's so important to be personally involved in your kids' education. Sometimes it's easy just to park them in front of a screen and do an online school. And I know that there are certain situations where that's necessary, because I know some parents must work, or a single mom has no choice. And so I get those situations where life is extremely difficult. But if you don't need that, I highly encourage you to sit down with your kids and open the books with them. Read through the stuff, read it aloud, participate as a family, because if you went to public school, you have no idea the difference in homeschooling, number one. And when you are the one participating, you're looking at the catalogs, maybe you go to a convention, maybe you peruse the samples online. You're still not getting the whole picture of how awesome and how different homeschool curriculum is until you sit down and go through it with your kids. And listen, I was homeschooled. I went to college. I got a full degree in business, and I love learning. I've always loved learning. I've loved reading everything. And I still sit down with my kids and we go through curriculum, and I'm just like, man, this is so good. I'm probably a lot more excited than they are, but I tell them, oh, guys, this is such a cool story. I'm so glad you're learning this. And I'm excited that I'm sitting there doing it too. And I can't tell you how many moms and dads say the same thing. They say, I did not know this about America's history. I did not know this about the Vikings. I didn't realize this about biblical history. So many cool things. And so I just would encourage parents to get involved in their own kids' homeschool. Don't just sit back and think, well, I'm not trained, so I can't do this. You don't need training. You're already their parent. Homeschool curriculum comes with all the teacher books, so it'll guide you every step of the way. It'll give you the answers. Don't doubt yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Just get in there and do it, and you will have so much more fun, and you'll be able to, I think, share that enthusiasm with your kids and make their learning come alive when you're able to put your personal spin on it. And just like I said, I sit there with my kids and I'm like, oh, this is one of George Washington's most important things that happened. And I want you to understand how important this is. There's nothing like that. A computer screen can't do that for your kids. And just giving them the textbooks, that's not going to do it for your kids. So go all in and learn the stuff or relearn it, and be a part of the whole process with your kids.
That's great. Yeah, we're actually using one of your Christmas resources, the
Oh,
literature copy work and the scriptures.
good. Uh-huh.
We've been doing that with our fourth grader, so that's great.
Oh, thank
Okay, well, we need to take a short break, but when we come back, I'd like to talk about the influence of Christianity versus society in homeschooling. Don't go away. I'll be back with my interview with Nicki Truesdell right after this.
In 2017, U.S. Parents Involved in Education published a detailed blueprint to close the U.S. Department of Education and end all federal education mandates. We are pleased to report that Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama has taken up this cause by filing H.R. 2691. This legislation is significant because it does more than just close the Department of Education. It transfers all its functions back to the states. The only exception is that the college loan and Pell Grant programs are transferred to the Department of Treasury. The bill also block grants funds for these former federal programs to the states, allowing greater local control. This step is promising, but USPI is recommending an amendment to make the block grant process more efficient. We encourage parents and citizens to join us in thanking Congressman Moore. For more information and to join our movement, visit USPI.org and connect with us at USPI on Facebook and X.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm April Few in for Sherry. With me today is Nicki Truesdell, a veteran homeschooler, author, and speaker. You often talk about the role of the Christian home in influencing society rather than society influencing the home. How do you counsel parents to approach homeschooling as more than just academics, but as discipleship, worldview training, and cultural formation?
It sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday talking about character training, and they made a good point. Like, I've got to teach math, science, history, English, reading, all these things, and now you want me to do character training too? It
Mm,
does seem overwhelming unless you realize that this is part of parenting anyway.
that's
And I
right.
think that the beauty of homeschooling is how much more time we have with our kids. And so that kind of thing can come very naturally once you realize how important it is to make it a part of normal conversation. And just like I was talking about right before the break, how it's important for parents to be personally involved with the instruction. I have a blog post on the personal relationship, like the importance of that personal relationship in homeschooling. Because if you sit down with your kid and have a conversation about the lesson, you get that opportunity, whether it's one sentence or 5 minutes of conversation, to talk about their worldview, to talk about maybe apply it to society today, what we're seeing in the world, something they saw on TV, or a friend said something. When you are having these all day long moments with your kids, which, I don't plan them, they just come up and I try to take advantage of the conversation. You have such an impact, and that doesn't even require a special character curriculum, a special worldview curriculum, or anything like that. Your worldview comes from what you put in, and so hopefully, first of all, parents are putting in the scriptures. If you're not a regular Bible reader and studier, today's the day to start that. You can't give what you don't have. And so the first thing I would encourage all parents to do is become more of a Bible reader than they were yesterday, because that's going to shape your worldview. And then secondly, when you're doing the curriculum, whatever it is with your kids, just think about how this applies to the world outside, or how does the scripture apply to this. So a couple of examples, these things come up every day if you watch for them. And I don't have a formula here, but I just want to give you a couple examples of how this is so natural. We see all kinds of talks about this race is bad, and I won't even go into it, but I'm sure you see the headlines lately. These people are bad. God doesn't love them. They're the scum of the earth. I see this online, and I just think, wow. And I am referring to Christians posting stuff. But if we understand Genesis and understand, like Answers in Genesis, and Ken Ham do a great job of this and showing how important that is, we understand that we're all one race. And so if we believe that, we're all one race, then there's nothing to disparage all the other people for, because they're the same as us. There is no white supremacy in a biblical worldview. There's no anti-Semitism in a biblical worldview, because we are all God's children. And that's one example. And you can apply that 1,000 times over any curriculum or any newscast or conversation that your kids might have heard or that you've heard. Another example, there's so many, but when your kids may be doing science, biology, health, and there's talk about different organs that we just take out willy-nilly now, like the appendix or the gallbladder. Do we believe God created humans, and do we believe that what he does is perfect? If we do, then he put those organs there for a reason, and maybe modern science doesn't know the answer. That doesn't mean there isn't an answer. And so there's all kinds of ways that you can influence your child's thinking and worldview and how they look at the world so much differently. And of course, you're going to be in the minority, because the rest of the world doesn't think this way. But we need them to. We need to raise our children up to think outside the worldly box and to see things from God's perspective. And when we do, just think how much they will influence the world as they grow up. There's a saying that the home is the nursery of the nation. And gosh, I believe that's so true, because, as long as we are helping, we're shaping whatever our kids are going to be someday, then we send them out there to become whatever they're going to be. And they may be the next healthcare provider or lawyer or congressman or mom or grandma. All of these things are so important, and shaping their worldview is going to affect the world for decades to come, maybe centuries to come. So I hope I didn't complicate things, but it really is not as complicated as it sounds. It's just being in tune with God's word, and then allowing yourself to think and bring up those little tidbits here and there. And it doesn't have to be a long drawn out process. It can be 2 or 3 sentences when you're reading the biology curriculum that day. Go, yeah, that's an important thing, So it just becomes natural the more you think about it and the more you read God's word. That's the formula right there.
Do you have any resources on your website for parents
Have a lot.
who, for getting started homeschooling?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I created a page on my website, and it's just at nickitruesdell.com, and the page is called Homeschool 101. And what I've done there is organize all my blog posts in order by topic. So there's getting started. I have different blog posts and podcasts on the different ages and stages. So if you're just starting maybe with a preschooler, I've got a blog post and a podcast just for that, and so all down that page is I try to answer all the different questions that come up with different posts. And then I started a podcast this past year. And so I'm kind of going back and talking about some of that stuff too. And so that's all there, free to use. I have some free downloads also for, as you said, like copy work and a few unit studies. And if I had more hours in a day, I'd make more of those. But yeah, I try to make it simple so that anyone can just click over there and browse through all the different topics and start learning. Where do I start if I want to do this tomorrow?
Yeah. Would you quickly take us through like a day in the life of you and homeschooling your different aged children?
Yeah, so right now I have three that are grown and graduated, and two teenagers at home still that are 14 and 17. So I can give you a day in the life of homeschooling teenagers, but I can also tell you what we did when all five were here
Yeah,
together.
maybe when they were here, they're together a little younger,
Yeah,
because that I have a younger and an older, and even I am like the younger just wants to play the whole time, and then she gets all pouty because her school's over or she doesn't want to do school. So I mean that could
yeah.
be pretty difficult too.
Well, what I used to do, now my kids are spread out in age, so the oldest and youngest are 14 years apart. So that kind of tells you it's like there's gaps all the way through there. Nobody's very close in
Yeah.
age. And when I had all of them at home together, obviously I would have a baby and a teenager and several in between. And it was busier. I had to be very scheduled. And I like schedules, so that didn't bother me. If you don't like schedules, I would say at least come up with a routine, like a list, and you don't have to put timestamps on it, but have a list like, here's what we want to accomplish today, and treat it like a to-do list that you can check off, and it kind of
Maybe I
keeps you
should
on
do
track.
that more.
I'm the kind of person that created spreadsheets with different colors and times and all that.
Oh my. So we're two weird uh opposites because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh well, we'll just jot this on a napkin and I'll write it down later.
That actually works too. I mean, that's the thing. There's no wrong way to do this. And actually, I have kind of evolved into that as I've gotten older, and now I've just got a couple of teenagers. It's more of a routine. We do not necessarily. I look at the clock all day long, but I know they don't. So I'm just thinking, okay, by a certain time you need to be done. But when I had several, I would kind of pair an older one with a younger one, and I have five. So this was something I could do. A big sister with a little brother for about 30 minutes. They could go do something together while I helped other kids with schoolwork. That, if you've got multiple children, three or four or more, that is a really handy tool, is the big sibling and the little sibling occupied for a little bit. If you got a baby or a toddler, what I always recommend is starting by first giving attention to that baby or toddler, or however many babies and toddlers you might have at one time. So I recommend what we would do is start with something fun that appealed to them, but it involved everyone. So we might sit together and sing a couple songs, or read a couple of books that those kids love and give them the attention first. And then they kind of felt like, okay, I had mom's attention. I'm happy for a little bit. And then we'd get right to something else that the big kids needed. So we'd have breakfast, chores. Breakfast time might involve some of our reading because everybody was sitting together and still and occupied. So meal times are a great way to knock out some stuff that you're going to do, like read aloud or even teach a lesson. If you got a whiteboard and you want to teach them something, people with food are captive audiences. So I did that a lot with breakfast and lunch. I utilized snacks when necessary, also, if I needed people to sit still and listen. So we did breakfast and chores, and then we'd start with our morning time. And then, depending on the ages of the children and what was coming up next, then we'd start on academic work. And like I said, pair up a big kid with a little kid. If you don't have that, the other thing I did with the little kid was I made busy boxes. And this is something that's on my website too. And I got it off of Pinterest a long time ago, but I just got like those shoe box sized tubs with a plastic lid, and I would put certain things in them, and they could pull out one, and it might have markers and stickers and paper in it, but I'd say you can do this box for about 30 minutes to an hour. And it wasn't something that they could just grab at random. They had to have permission. And so it was like new and fun because it wasn't always readily available to them. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And then another one might have flashcards, or I had little boys And so there would be a whole box of dinosaur themed things to do, like dinosaur stickers, dinosaur flashcards, dinosaur figures, bingo. I had it all. And so I would just say, okay, today you can play with the dinosaur box while we do math lessons. And they knew, okay, this is fun. I get the dinosaur box today. And so it did keep them occupied a little bit. So giving your little ones something targeted to do, like specific and special, helps a lot. And then taking it up, putting it away, wait another week to pull it out, and it's in it. They're not bored with it. Basically, they're excited to see it, and they will actually spend some time playing with it. I utilize nap time for schoolwork sometimes. There were also years when I needed a nap too. So if the babies were napping, I was also napping, and the kids. The big kids had quiet time. Actually, quiet time is a really good idea. And I did have to train my kids, but once everybody was trained, we did it for years and years and years. And even my big kids would say they missed it when we kind of just drifted out of it. But basically, it was 1 hour where everybody had to be somewhere quiet, doing something quiet. And usually babies were napping, but even all the way up to teenage years, everyone had to go to a specific place and they could read, or the girls might knit or something that was really quiet, but no one could come out of that room. No one could talk. There was no TV or anything like that on. And 1 hour of it, and it became a routine that was really helpful for me, and it kind of reset the day, and everybody had that quiet. It's kind of a decompression time even for those that weren't sleeping, and everybody looked forward to it. So man, that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is learn to do quiet time. The training takes a while. It won't happen overnight, but with repetition and building up to an hour, it is so worth it. And then probably
Yeah.
my biggest piece of advice is learn to combine subjects if you can. And it sounds impossible because we think in terms of public school grade levels, but I learned this many years ago, like you said, from other homeschool moms who are more experienced. And putting kids together for many things works well. Like history, it doesn't have to be a grade level. Science doesn't have to be a grade level. Literature, Bible, geography. There's so many things that a whole group of kids of all ages can learn together. And I do talk about this more in detail on my website, but it saves you time in planning. It saves money on curriculum. It saves your sanity because you're not preparing multiple lesson plans. And then what you're left with is individual math lessons and individual language arts lessons because those are more leveled for each individual child. But combining sort of like one room schoolhouse style really helps a lot.
Yeah, when you were talking about the older kids helping the younger, that's exactly what I was thinking was the one-room schoolhouses because that
Yeah.
is what they did. I mean, there was no colleges of education and what is it, IPAs or all of
All
these
those ABC
things.
things.
IEPs, sorry, what did I say?
Yeah.
IPA? I think that's
Yeah. IEPs, all the numbers, 504, all of that.
right,
Yeah.
right.
It's just
And
common sense.
we were better for it, like you said. So I love your perspective. Can I ask? We're going to take another break, but before we do, if a parent has their child in government school, wants to homeschool, where's the first place you recommend they start? The very first website or person or whatever.
The very first thing you want to do is find out your state law because every state has a little bit different law for homeschooling. It's legal in all 50, but the process is a little different depending on where you are. So you can go to Homeschool Legal Defense Association website, or if you know of your state homeschool organization, contact them and ask them, what do I do to withdraw from public school and begin homeschooling? I live in Texas. There is nothing. There's no law except that you've got to teach your kids. I mean, there's no rule to follow. And so you
Do
basically
you have
just,
to do a certain number of days per year?
nope, nothing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That is, we have to do 180 days here, and I would love for some legislation to be passed to where we don't have to do that, and we don't
yeah,
have to keep a portfolio or do anything. So it sounds
yeah,
like Texas's law is very lenient.
very. Oklahoma's the same way. And I think there are a few
Okay.
others like us, but we literally report to no one. We answer to
That is
no
what
one.
I'm talking about.
Amen.
Especially, it got me because I'm reporting, to the association who answers to the State Department if they
Okay.
ever need anything or whatever. But why does the State Department need to know anything if they can't even educate the students who are currently in the system? It's almost like, how can you tell me what to do?
That
But
is
anyway,
the $1,000,000 question.
right.
Well, because
Yep.
they're looking at their standards, but they don't care that they don't meet the standards. They just want everybody to have the standards. I don't know. It
That's
it
right.
doesn't make a bit of sense. So yeah, I would I
That's
would
right.
definitely find out your state law and then follow whatever that is. And so if your state says this is how you withdraw, this is where you get permission, do that. Follow the law. Don't break the law because you'll be sorry.
That's right. Yes.
And homeschooling is so worth whatever you have to do it. And I know, like you said, in some states you do have to jump through some hoops. And your homeschool organization will be able to help you figure out how to do all of that. I know people that say, well, our state has very strict laws, but we unschool and I do it legally. So there are ways to do any method. Like we were talking about, there's so many methods. Just follow the guidelines, and then if you don't like the law, work to change the law.
That's right. Okay, so we do need to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to ask you two questions that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with my interview with Nicki Truesdell.
U.S. Parents Involved in Education strongly appreciates Alabama Congressman Barry Moore's H.R. 2691 to close the U.S. Department of Education and eliminate burdensome federal mandates. This bill proposes block granting funds to states based on the amount of income taxes paid by each state's residents. Part of the block grant funds could be allocated as a federal income tax deduction for parents who opt out of government schools. The remaining funds would then be sent directly to each state's education fund. USPI supports this amendment as it promotes freedom, flexibility, and parental choice. We urge citizens to advocate for this amendment and support legislation that empowers parents while reducing federal overreach. For more information and to join our movement, visit USPI.org and connect with us at USPI on Facebook and X.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm April Few, in for Sherry. With me today has been Nicki Truesdell, a veteran homeschooler, author, and speaker. Nicki, we close our show with two important questions. The first question is, what concerns you most about what is happening in education today?
As a homeschooler, I'll tell you what concerns me most is the voucher issue, school choice, education savings accounts, vouchers. It's all the same thing, but whatever name it has, that concerns me because I really, truly believe it's going to change the face of homeschool freedom. And it's passing rapidly in multiple states right now. And I am anti-voucher because what that comes with is more regulation. Even in a state that has a little bit of regulation on homeschooling, it's going to increase it. And it won't happen overnight. It won't happen tomorrow. It will take sometimes years. It depends on the state and who's running the state. But it is going to change education for homeschoolers. It's going to change our freedoms as we know them right now. And like I said, I live in a state where there are no regulations. And so any regulation that's introduced for Texas is a bad thing, and it's going to take away what we have. And so I think that that's my main concern right now is that even homeschoolers are so interested in getting that check, that voucher, and defending it. And that's my tax dollars. And they're missing the bigger picture, which is the eroding of true homeschool freedom.
Yeah, we actually just got our property tax notice, and I was infuriating because I was showing my husband, like, look at all the money that goes to the schools that we don't
Mm-hmm.
utilize. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, USPI is definitely against the voucher schemes also for the very reasons that you just explained. Homeschooling traditionally has been, a sacrifice for families. So it is really tempting. Of course, it's always tempting when there's
Yeah.
money being dangled in front of you to take that. But I think
Yeah.
your advice is golden. And
It's a trap.
So, yeah, it's totally a trap. Yeah, because what was it? Maine, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania? I can't remember which state. Um, but they were doing some voucher stuff, and then the legislature decided that they thought it was necessary for homeschool parents to have a college degree to homeschool, whereas before it was not, required. So that's just one example of
Oh,
how,
yeah.
the legislature will give money and then they say, well, we need to have accountability.
Absolutely.
How are they spending these tax dollars? And so it's just a slippery slope.
It is.
I totally agree with you. So with that being said, something you're concerned about, what is something that gives you hope?
The growth of homeschooling, actually.
Hmm.
And I think that's come about even more since COVID, since people really got an inside look at what was happening in their schools. But it just continues to grow when people see what's happening. There's so many things happening in public education, and from the clear Marxist indoctrination to the sexual abuse of students and the trans ideology that's being pushed on students. It's not an accident. These cases are not random. This is all a very deliberate movement that's been in the works for a long time, because if you can get the kids while they're young, you can change a nation. And I am not a conspiracy theorist when I say that there is a deliberate movement to steal our kids, to steal them from their family, from their churches, to steal their joy, to steal their bodies. And so more and more parents are waking up to this, and they're speaking out, and they're seeing it, and they're taking the chance on homeschooling. And so that gives me hope, because our numbers are bigger than ever. And it scares people that are not in homeschooling. It scares the people that are against it, because they think, what are all these adults doing without, regulation, and someone's in charge?
Education degrees.
Yeah. And I just think, isn't it awesome how many parents are just being little families all over the country, and nobody's telling them
Amen.
how or what to do? They're just making their own decisions. It's so American, to do that. And that's what made America so great, was individuality, and freedom. And they're taking that and actually just doing it. And I love that. I love that every family is realizing they can be individual. Every homeschool can be a little bit different. Every family can look a little bit different. That's what makes this country so great. It's not everybody on an assembly line and, following factory standards. That's boring. And so that's what gives me hope, is one new family at a time, seeing the possibilities and taking their kids out of the corrupt government system.
Amen. I couldn't agree more. Well, Nikki, thank you so much again for being on the show. I am a huge fan. I've been following your stuff for several years now.
Thank you.
If you found today's discussion eye-opening, please share this episode with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, and subscribe to stay informed. You can connect with us on Facebook and X at USPI, and visit uspie.org to join the movement. Until next time, I'm April Few. Thank you for your support of USPI and our efforts to unmask government schools.
U.S. Parents Involved in Education is a nonprofit coalition dedicated to restoring local control of education and parental authority. By empowering parents to reclaim responsibility for their children's learning and encouraging states to move away from federal influence, USPI seeks to create a culture where parents are the primary decision makers in education and schools support families without the burden of federal mandates. If you want to start a state or regional USPI chapter in your area, please visit uspie.org and complete the brief questionnaire in the chapters section.